Good afternoon. Scott Stanfield here, and I am the Modern Longeviterian. The show is called It's My Friday, and this is a special afternoon episode. So welcome this afternoon for all the people watching on Spirituality Gone Wild, people on LinkedIn, on all the Facebook places and YouTube that we are. And I just want to say thank you for being here today or catching this replay. Before I bring Steve Weber on, our guest today, I want to really focus on this Untamed Club that we have with Spirituality Gone Wild. So if it's not in the comments on the channel you're seeing here now, the link for Scott Untamed to go join this, I will put it in the show notes or in a comment after the show is over. And again, this is live, so I can't go now or you see me down on my phone doing that stuff. So what is the Untamed Club? It's part of Spirituality Gone Wild. And basically we have over 20, and we just had an announcement for 2 more co-creators coming in just today that we'll have in there for $22 a month. You have access to take once a month a 5-day free course. And by the time you get there next week, I'm going to have a 5-day course that is going to be on sleep. That is the thing, the most important supporting pillar of your longevity and your health span for today and your lifespan for tomorrow. So go check that out. And you will get that. And there's also, I have a book that's associated with that and a checklist and all of these different things. So before I go any further, it's time for me to bring, now Steve Weber and I met on LinkedIn. He has worked in the restaurant business, not as a manager like me, but worked for Bubba Gump Shrimp Company as Forrest Gump. He was on the Restaurant General Manager podcast, episode number 2. And I've been on his show 3 times. I think it's episode 33, 46, and 55 are the episodes I've been on his live show. And now we've flipped the mic around and I have American Gumption Morning Show host, my friend, Steve Weber. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's, I'm super excited because you've interviewed me now more than I've interviewed you. Right. So yeah, it's now 3-2, right? Is where we're at.
Hey, and we're just all having fun here.
And I love that, your live show is super amazing, because you are really getting a crazy amount of high quality guests on your show. And like this morning's episode with the shaman was, I tuned into that because I didn't have a live show coming up in the morning. And it was just an amazing episode. And I encourage people to go check that out. You got so many things going on. And so when is the show's 5 days a week in the morning, right?
Right. Monday through Friday, and broadcast from 10 to 11 Eastern or 7 to 8 a.m. on the West Coast. And typically I do 5 days a week, although I've been giving myself off at least 1 or 2 Mondays a month, kind of giving an extra day there on the weekend to just sort of to chill out. So roughly 20 shows a month is what I've been doing.
That's amazing. So what made you get started with doing a live show?
Well, I had this vision of American Gumption hit me about 1.5 years ago. I was still living in Montana, and I was really kind of at the point where I knew I needed to do something. I had been in Montana about 10 years, and the original reason that I ended up going there never quite worked out the way I thought it was. But it turned out that it was a great time for me. And I realized that the reason that I ended up being there was completed and it was time for me to go. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I decided I was going to go out and work from the road for like a 4 to 7 year period and interview people. I imagined a live, like in-person interview format. And so that was kind of what the vision was. And then I ended up back on the East Coast with some family, kind of a temporary basis. And, COVID hit and we were kind of locked down. And so I thought, why not do something virtual? And really, it was almost like the moment that I decided to do something virtual that I ended up meeting Debbie G and Spirituality Gone Wild. And within 3 days of us meeting, it became obvious that I should decided to do a live show. And then Debbie said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do a variety show, Monday through Friday variety show. And I picked, 10 to 11. I'm not 100% sure why. And that's how it started. And so I had a big network of people that I felt like I could connect with. But gosh, if I would, I haven't looked at the, I haven't looked at the stats for sure, but I would guess that at least half, maybe more, are just kind of new people that I've met. Some of are from the Spirituality Gone Wild. A lot of them are from the Spirituality Gone Wild community, but others just sort of came out of the woodwork. And then there's a good chunk of them that were people from my past that I knew of, and I had been working as a speaker for the last 10 years, so I knew lots of people who had the ability to communicate and talk. So that's that. So American Gumption really was the foundation of it, and then meeting Debbie G and Spirituality Gone Wild just became the way to get kickstarting virtually. So now I don't know what's going to happen for sure, but I still want to get out on the road, and I want to get out there sooner than later, sometime hopefully in 2021, and do an interview in-person format, but also keep going with the daily show. And if not daily, then certainly several times a week, in kind of this virtual format. So kind of a combination of the virtual format plus a live like a more of a produced interview thing, that something that gets a little more like maybe like I don't want to say a 60-minute style interview, but maybe like a Charles Carroll across America, riding around in the RV and interviewing people and meeting people and, doing, like I said, a produced video interview with them. So we'll see how it all works out. But for now, we're broadcasting 5 days a week, 2 hours before your show.
Right. And, for me, I'm just, when you're coming on at 8 o'clock, because I'm more of a night owl, I'm just kind of getting up and, and doing that. Well, I'm not more kind of, I am a night owl. I have to be careful not going to bed at 3 a.m. I have to always guard against that. But no, I love catching your show and catching the replays of the show. And it's been super impactful for me, and I know for other listeners as well. And I see comments from the same people. So you definitely are developing a following for your show. And that's an amazing thing. And it's all about, consistency, doing this over and over and over. Before we get into living your life with Gumption, which is really the theme of the show, what are some of the things you're learning from the guests that come on the show? What are you getting out of doing the show?
Well, you were interviewed 3 times, and really, it was really about health and wellness, and so that was kind of a fun conversation, because I have an interest in that sort of thing. I want to take care of myself. I reached when I got to be 55, 7 years ago, I kind of had like a switch go off, and I was like, oh crap, I'm not young anymore, and I just was feeling. I was feeling older. I never felt old up until, I got aches and pains and just sort of things. And I became aware that I wanted to take care of myself better than I had been taking care of myself. And I wasn't in horrible shape, but there were certainly things that I could do. So your show that way, but I'd say more importantly than the health, your physical health has been, my own spiritual, consciousness, awakening that started in 2009 and has continued on since that point. So that's really where my strongest interest lies, is in, the mind and, the connection, the mind-body connection, that whole thing. So guests that can talk to that are, I'm just hanging out, being the student learning, and,
right.
And everybody brings something different, and everybody, brings a piece of it. And I feel like my role as the host or co-creator of the show, because we're really creating with other people, the content, is to let them shine and to, show them and spotlight them and their brilliance. And so anyway, that's been my philosophy with the show, is to let people, share what they have to know and just sort of stay out of the way. And it's my show in the sense that I get to show up every day, but and I get to do a monologue for 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning. So then after that, I try to step out of the way and let them, shine and show their brilliance.
Right. I think that's one of the reasons that I have normally 1 to 2 shows a week out of the 5 that I do, where it's a solo episode. I don't do so much of a monologue. Although I'm thinking of adding a couple things in, like these funny tidbits a day. My son, who's 18, he said, Dad, they discovered some new bacteria that's never been discovered before in people's belly buttons. And I started reading an article on that. I thought that'd be funny, like about, microbiome and, all those type of things that kind of bring these funny, tidbits in that are new in the world, or somebody you may not have heard of, or things like that. But you're right. I am a student in the show. And I think that, especially when I was doing podcasts that were, lots of research on the guest, a dedicated, couple hours of interviewing, then editing and listening to it again, I was definitely like taking a big piece of that person with me and installing it into who I am. And I could list, all the things, right? I remember, your show, we talked about the 3 things from the movie, right? Which, the feather, the shoe, and the box of chocolates, right? That you, and that's just something that's a piece of me. So let's transition in now. So what is, living with gumption? How do you define that, and what is it?
Yeah. So, so kind of the backstory is that I worked for the Bubba Gump restaurant for 15 years as their Forrest Gump impersonator. And obviously the movie played a big role in my life, but it played a big role within lots of people's lives. And they took a lot of inspiration from it. And having, just sitting on the bench, talking to people and listening to what they said about the movie, I knew that there were important lessons from that movie that were much greater than the average movie, right? The average movie kind of comes and goes, but for whatever unique reason, this one struck a nerve with people, and it stayed with people, and it touched hearts and changed lives and minds. So I began the journey as I was finishing that career and developing my speaking business. What was I going to talk about? And I remember I initially said I wanted to talk about personal responsibility. I had a coach that, somebody who, and I didn't even know this person really. And I said, I want to talk about personal responsibility. And the person said, well, you can't talk about personal responsibility. Nobody will hire you to talk about personal responsibility. And now this is roughly 2006-07 timeframe. I'm still working for Bubba Gump at the time. And I remember thinking, oh, well, crap, I can't talk about personal responsibility. Not knowing then that was the silliest piece of advice I had ever heard in my entire life. Personal responsibility is the foundation of everything that we do. And every person, needs to end up taking, more of that. And businesses need people who have that. So it was crazy. But I thought, okay, I won't talk about personal responsibility, but I will talk about gumption. And I obviously took gumption from the movie, and that wasn't a bad thing. Actually, it was brilliant. It was great that the person said it, because if I had become known as the guy talking about personal responsibility, it wouldn't have been as memorable. But what I did was I said gumption is defined as taking personal responsibility for your thoughts, for your actions, and for your interactions with others. So I essentially just redefined what the word gumption meant. And I said it, I disguised personal responsibility as gumption, but it's basically your thoughts, your actions, and your interactions with others. And so your mindset is your thoughts, and moxie is your actions. And moxie is someone who is energetic or someone who gets things done, a go-getter. And then graciousness is the interactions with other people. And graciousness was really my own word that that meant a lot to me, because sitting on the bench, I had enough experiences that I realized that I had to be a gracious person 24/7, and I had to be a gracious person, like truly inside of my being. I couldn't be gracious when I was like working from 12 to 5, communicating with people, or if you had a traditional job, you couldn't be gracious like when you got to work, and then then not gracious during lunchtime, and then gracious like the afternoon hours, or gracious when you went home, but not gracious when you're at work. It's like a 24/7 thing. So that's how that came about.
So, you sat on the bench, right? Listening to people talk about what they learned from the movie, and the movie is so intertwined with how Forrest, even as a young kid, was influencing popular culture, like teaching Elvis how to dance, right? When he had braces on his legs, or when he was running cross country, like the mud on the t-shirt that came out of smiley face. And then it happens, that type of stuff, right? He was just not the smartest guy, not the biggest book smarts on, those type of things, but was influencing culture through his no nonsense style of just being Forrest, right? So when you were sitting on the bench and people were talking to you and you were an impersonator and those things, I mean, what was that like to sit there and to chat with people as Forrest Gump?
Yeah, it was surreal. People, people, I would say that most people like realize that I was obviously, not the real Forrest Gump and was an actor or an impersonator, but it somehow allowed most people to believe, like pretending believe that they were having a conversation with Forrest Gump, and so they would share all kinds of things about how the movie influenced them and affected them, and it was really an expression of genuine love that I would feel, all day long from people. And it was quite nice. And, it was kind of like a drug in the sense that, you got there and you just loved it. I mean, I embraced it, and I learned how to be in the moment with people and to allow them their opportunity to express whatever it was they wanted to express. So I was already probably maybe a better than average listener. And so I improved that skill by just allowing them to share whatever it was that they wanted to share with me about it. And it was never real deep. It was a lot of the same basic things in terms of, how the movie affected them and how they would take their kids out to the ballpark and, they would tell their boy to run, Charlie, run. And, those same kind of themes repeated themselves. But it was all about love. And it was all about, people just connecting with that movie. And so I wanted to somehow try to continue it. And so the Gumption thing came about.
No, I bet it was a super surreal experience where, I mean, you're playing a character, people connected with the character, you get an opportunity just to listen to people. I can't even imagine what it was like. I mean, you're getting paid to listen to people sit on the bench, right? And just express what this movie impacted them. It's no wonder why this movie inside and out, more so than probably even the people that created it, because you continue to talk about it day in and day out and even on the 25th anniversary, you broke it down into how many different scenes and the life lessons from that?
94 life lessons from the movie. And I did, so that was in 2019. I did from March through July 6th, I did a, countdown, 94 days of different scenes that I just sort of randomly picked out. I had actually broken the movie into like 224 sort of distinct scenes. And then out of that 224, I picked out 94 that, were maybe more memorable or somehow they were a life lesson. And so I just sort of arbitrarily picked like what were the 80s and what were the 70s and the 60s. And of course, some of the more famous scenes became the top 10. Right. Life is like a box of chocolates had to be right up there in the top 5 for sure. So,
right. So, Steve, like I said, you've broken this down, I'm sure it's changed over the 26 years that this has happened. What, if you had to pick like the one most important lesson you learned from the movie, what do you think that would be?
Well, the lesson that so the 3 life lessons that I consider the most important are the 3 symbols that I consider the most important are the feather that first comes out of the sky and lands at the foot of Forrest Gump, and he picks it up. And I say those are the choices, or those are the opportunities that come into our life and that we have to reach down and pick up. So opportunities are, they never land in your lap. They always land at your feet. And so, you have to reach down and actually pick them up. So that's kind of lesson number 1, because Forrest did that literally at the beginning of the movie, but then metaphorically, he did that throughout the movie where opportunities showed up and he seized them and took advantage of them. Very closely related is life is like a box of chocolates, the chocolate box. You get to choose whatever chocolate you want. You get to choose whatever life you want. And so it's about the choices that that we make. And again, Forrest made good choices throughout his lifetime. And the third life lesson was the shoe, the Nike shoe. And that represents the journey of life and specifically the life chapters. And that's really what the movie is all about. It's Forrest's story, his life chapter. He's a boy. He's in high school. He goes to college. He plays football. He goes into the army. He's a soldier. Then he gets wounded and he plays ping pong. And then he gets discharged from the army and he starts his shrimping. He buys a shrimp boat and he's a shrimperman. And then he strikes it, rich with that. And he retires and he's back home. And Jenny comes back and then she runs away and he runs across the country for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours. And then, Jenny invites him to come to visit in Savannah, Georgia. And then that's when the movie becomes like kind of a live movie, because now we're sitting on the bench and he's talking to the elderly woman and he says that he's, going down the street and then he jumps up off the bench and runs down and knocks on Jenny's door and then finds out he's a father. And so, but all the way up until that point, which happens at about 20 minutes left in the movie, it's all flashback scenes from when he's a child and when he was in high school and in college playing football and in the army. So it was all this like kind of flashback scenes. So the journey of life is really very important, and the life chapters and the transitioning from one chapter to the next chapter becomes, super critical in terms of, how do we live our lives? Because we like to hold on to what we have and what is comfortable. And Forrest effortlessly, just transitions from one to the other. Now, of course, that's the movie. And, real life is complicated and more difficult to do, but it's a nice aspiration and a nice goal. So those are the three, what I call the big three, the opportunities that come into your life, the choices that you make, and then just the journey and the life chapters and the transition from one to the other. So
it's so impactful, right? It's like, even if I just look and apply that to me, right? And that is, I bought modernlongevitarian.com almost 9 years ago and did not put a website to it until June of this year. And being furloughed, being, back home in Utah with the family, what am I going to do? The restaurant industry's, turned upside down. And so that's just part of the journey, right? But that's also just like an effortless transition. Like I'd set this up 9 years ago to be able to put all these pieces together, and then coming on your show and you recommending the Spirituality Gone Wild Network. You were already a part of them. And then I didn't even know there was a beta for LinkedIn Live. You recommended me apply for that. And so for me to pick up that feather when they said, yes, you're approved, it was like, okay, now I'm going to do a live show, which I was reluctant, almost like Joseph Campbell's, Heroes of a Thousand Faces, the hero's journey. There was conflict and I was reluctant to do that. So, my point into all that is how do you see what you learn from the movie and how it applies to what you're learning around mindset these days, like the law of vibration, law of attraction, those type of things? How do you see those combining themselves in the work you're doing now and what you're learning on your show?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in some ways they've been like kind of parallel tracks of learning. So, we learn certain things at certain times. And so the deep dive into the movie, it was funny. You mentioned that, I sat there and talked to all the people and learned about the movie. Well, it really was only at the very end, like 2009, 10, 11, when I stopped working with Bubba Gump in 2011, but it was like that 2010, 11, 12, when I started writing about the movie that I really thought about it in a deeper way. I instinctively knew that there was something very special there. And I kind of knew I knew like the actual movie part, but I didn't know the messages of the movie in a deeper way because I hadn't thought about them. And then, of course, starting to write about them, forced me to think about them. And so, it was a lot like your journey where you bought Modern Longevitarian, 9 years ago, because you knew you knew there was something there, but you weren't sure what it was that was there. And that was that same kind of knowing that I had the whole time that I was working with the, interacting with the people. So then at the same time that I started doing the the life lessons from the movie and the principles of Gumption, I also realized that I needed to do some personal work and personal development on myself. I had, we all are born into families that are, we go into schools and we are raised in an environment. And so we get that programming from the first 7 years of our lives when when the people who love us and care for us, do the best they can to take care of us and to, raise us so that we can go out into the world. And we end up carrying those beliefs in kind of an autopilot way, our subconscious mind. And so anyway, I started realizing that as I was attempting to communicate the principles of Gumption and the life lessons from the movie, I needed to better define what it was that I believed. And so I started looking into, what were my beliefs, and do I really believe those things, or do I, are they just things that I was taught that I thought I believed, or I think I believed, but I didn't. So I kind of did like this deep excavation of all of these beliefs and ended up getting rid of quite a few original beliefs that I had, and replacing them. And that's ongoing work that continues to this very day. I love spirituality gone wild, because it's like a deep dive into, it's an opportunity to peel back another layer, to keep going, and all the other hosts and all the other co-creators that are part of this wonderful channel, kind of all bring a different way of thinking about it and helping us. So I don't know, what was your original question?
I think you answered it right. It was basically, how is the what you learned from the movie, how does that work with what you're learning now with your, mindset, what you learned on the show? And I think you really explained it when you were saying, how did you say this exactly? You were saying that, about you realize what your beliefs were, right? And you're stripping away. So, and what I refer to that as generational cycles, right? These beliefs in the first 6 years. And but for those of you who don't know this, the first is physical. The first 6 years of our lives, our brains are actually in a theta wave state, which is like a hypnotic state. And our brains act like a video recorder, and everything we see is what we end up playing back 7 years on. So Dr. Joe, that's the work of Bruce Lipton. Bruce Lipton talks about that. And I love the way that Dispenza talks about it, where he says we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of them are the same as the day before. Right. And so what happens is, if you believe that you need to eat meat to be healthy, or you need it to just live, then the next day, likely you're going to think that you need to eat meat, right? Where somebody else may grow up in a vegetarian world or vegan world or something like that, and they don't need it. Or if you think you need to go trade time for dollars, and you need to go get a blue collar job and drive a truck or do those type of things, be an electrician, those type of things, or your parents were professionals that had college degrees and attorneys or doctors or scientists or any of those things, you may think that that's how you need to make your money. Or if your parents were entrepreneurial, or if mom stayed home or dad stayed home, or any of those type of things. Or even now, you have families that may be gay or lesbian, right? So you grow up in the different type of thing that way. And so those type of things are laid on us in our first 6 years. And then we end up playing those tapes back over and over and over and over again. And a lot of that comes up in negative self-talk, like we've been told we weren't good enough, or those type of things. And so I think you really explained it well with that. And that's something that's really been on, the forefront for me over the last bit, because one of the very few blessings of moving away from my family 18 years ago, was I was able to, like, hey, this is Sunday. I'm not going over to grandma's or my aunts or my uncles to eat the food that's been prepared, the potluck, and I have to eat this or I'm going to be criticized. I could choose to eat whatever I want, right? And so my diet changed over time. Who I am changed over time. All those different things has really, really happened. And so you're right. Generational cycles are a big piece of the work that I do, even with my coaching clients and with myself. Right. So it's a pretty interesting puzzle with that. We got a couple comments that came in here. Looks like, Prosh is saying he's liking Spirituality Gone Wild. So hi, Prosh. Thanks for tuning in on LinkedIn. And he's given us great work on this. So thanks for tuning in. Gosh, Steve, we could talk for a long time. We're 30 minutes in, right? And you and I have been doing this, game for a while. So what, you're going to be putting up a course, and let's talk about courses, 5-day courses in Spirituality Gone Wild, the Untamed Club, and the value of that. I mean, it's going to, when we had a meeting last week and we talked about it, or maybe even 2 weeks ago, we talked about the value of this $22 a month is really more like you're getting $500 out of this. I mean, because you're getting a free course every month, and those things are, and soon you're going to be putting a course up based off, what are you doing for the 5-day course in the Untamed Club?
Yeah, the life lessons from the movie will be, what I'll go a little deeper, kind of what we talked about here, but really kind of, outlining them and getting people to think about the fact that everything really is an opportunity. And so the feather represents the opportunity. Everything's a choice. That's the chocolate box. And then it's just all a journey. And the funny thing the neat thing about the journey is that, it all happens in the present moment. And, Forrest kind of retroactively talked about his story, but it was, it's all, life is all lived in the moment. And that's really the key thing. So how do we become more present? How do we, appreciate what it is that's right in front of us? How do we not let what has happened to us in the past affect what's happening today? And how do we not, be focused so much on the future that we can't enjoy what's happening in the present moment. We always think like that, the stick with the carrot out in front of it, I'll be happy as soon as I get that carrot. But whatever happens is you never quite get there because, the stick and the carrot's always moving in front of you. So those will be the type of things that I'll be offering in my 5-day course. And then I'll offer a deeper course that goes through, like something like 25 of the different, scenes and life lessons that, go in a little bit deeper than that. And so that's where I see, the value that I bring. Now, what's neat about it is that there's like 25 of us, you're one, I'm one, but there's a whole bunch of other people who are also creating courses. And so the membership will allow you access to any of those, any of their basic courses. And so you can sample different people, different co-creators, different thought leaders, and you can sample their particular brand, and then you can listen to their show. You can, get some additional learnings from them. And there is no one size fits all. And that's what I believe Debbie is creating with the coalition of us, is allowing us all to, kind of share what we know and what we teach to a community of people who want to learn and teach and want to grow personally. And I like to say that it's about the human experience. Everybody, the common denominator, whether you're talking about physical well-being or mental well-being or spiritual well-being, is all about creating a better human experience. And that's so people who are interested in that, this is a great place for you to hang out.
Absolutely. Right. Like right now, the courses that are in there, you got, Andre Lind, a 5-day mind body reset that has a workout every day. Radiance has a course on emotional intelligence, which is a big piece of what emotional intelligence is, and EQ is such a big piece of that. I know that, it's just an amazing, and that's just a sample of those. I know, it was a Joan of Angel. She has a course in there as well. And we know with that, and, you and I, plus there's going to be, 20 other courses in there to choose from. And you could literally, you can't get through those in a year. Right. No, it's just it's a wealth of knowledge from all across all kind of awards. And you've got Stream of David in there. You've had a lot of people on your show. I've had Kristen on my show. I've had Andre on my show. Now you're on my show. booking Debbie G and Joan on the show as well. So, and I've got a couple people next week that Joe's going to be on the show next week, I think on the 15th as well. So it's an amazing group of people, and they're doing some amazing work. And it's just going to be this one-stop shop to where you can, mind, body, and soul, and you can take these 5-day courses and even bigger, 21-day courses and 8-week courses as well. So it's going to be it is really cool, and it's going to get even better and better every day. Right. All right. So, wow. I mean, I don't know what else to ask you, Steve. You got any?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm just glad that I'm glad that we met at the beginning of the year. And what's funny is we met at the beginning of the year, and you invited me to be on your general manager's podcast. And I knew that I was, beginning this American Gumption projects. And so I thought, it was just sort of like, oh yeah, sure. I'll come on the podcast and talk about it. And it was a lot of fun because I was not a restaurant general manager, but I had watched a lot of restaurant general managers, and I had seen, general managers succeed, and I had seen general managers not succeed. And I was busy doing what I was doing, but I also, just being a student of life, you just sort of watched and you kind of go, oh, okay, great. So I had a lot of respect for the industry and the people who worked in it. And I had never actually worked in a restaurant before. I never waited tables. I never, worked in a kitchen. And so this was all kind of new to me. And, but anyway, fast forward 6 months, and then suddenly, we kind of both find ourselves in a similar situation. And so, who would have predicted at the beginning of the year what's happening? And I just think that it's a good time for us, for all people, to be reinventing themselves, to be thinking about, what it is that they want to do going forward, because a lot of the things that we took for granted, are kind of collapsing and falling apart. And, your industry, the restaurant business industry, that took it harder than, there's only a couple other industries that you could look at to go, oh, they got hurt as hard. And then there's lots of industries that, really weren't affected at all through this whole thing. But people have been all affected in one way or the other. People are now working from home. People are communicating this way. We call this face-to-face now, but,
right.
In the olden days, like 10 months ago, like the Zoom meetings were kind of considered low tech and not very, like they were better than nothing, but, they weren't mainstream, and they're very much mainstream. Less than 1 year later, they're very much mainstream. So
they are. Yeah,
things are changing, and we have an opportunity, and I'm looking at it like a feather that, hey, we get to choose, like imagine there's 100 feathers. You're sitting on the bench and there's 100 feathers looking down there, and you can choose whatever one you want. You get to pick up whatever one you want. And no, you don't, the feather that you had been, using and riding the last couple of years may have like turned kind of, rotten and nasty, and, you have no choice but to let it go. And so anyway, it's a time of real disruptive change. And that's why I think spirituality gone wild, and what all of us in this community are doing is a good opportunity for people to relearn and re-kickstart their careers and their lives and go in a new direction.
Yes. And the irony in this is that, what spurred me on this trail of, before I even knew what modern longevitarian is or any of those things, was, when you said you were 55, you had, you decided to start making changes and living healthier and those things. And you look amazing. You take care of yourself. I can tell you do. And we've talked about sleep and breathing while you sleep and different styles of breathing and stuff like that. And offline. And we've had multiple conversations. We're like, we're live stream buddies in a lot of ways, right? We talk about these things and help each other out with stuff. But my point being is that was when my dad, and come to find out, when I actually did the math and talked to mom and dad, both of them got cancer at age 55. Now, dad's a little bit older than mom, so it was 3 years apart. But my dad got prostate cancer at age 55, had to go through chemo, had surgery, and he's 72 now. mom turned 70 in April of next year, and she had to have surgery and hysterectomy and all those type of things. And so there's correlation around that age. And so initially, I was 40. I was 31, and then I was struggling with my weight. I lost 40 pounds twice over that time period. And when I was just before I turned 40, I had a well visit, and I've been a vegetarian for 10 years, pescatarian. I was 40 pounds overweight. My blood pressure was good, which was a great improvement over the 10 years prior to that. But it led me into saying, I'm not a vegetarian, I'm a longevitarian. That's where it really came from, because it was so much more than just diet, because you're not really going to eat your way out of it. We're not all doing this. And even when I started this, 4 or 5 months ago, there were only 6 pillars that I was willing to even talk about, right? There are 8 pillars now, where you get about Wim Hof method and being cold or hot and saunas, and then the connection to earth and family and those things. And so you're right about the evolution of these things and how they start and how it grows. And it's just really an amazing process. I would have continued going down. If it hadn't been for the furlough and COVID and those things, I would have continued going down the road of being the restaurant GM coach.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what I was doing. I was working in that. I was doing that. I was doing the Restaurant GM podcast. I was putting out posts every day on LinkedIn, developed up to 30,000 connections on LinkedIn, those things. But when the restaurant world dried up, which is really crazy, because I didn't know this, and I don't know if you know this, Steve, or not, is 50% of the food supply comes through restaurants. Mm-hmm. Who would have thought that Americans eat out so much that 50% of the food supply, that's why it's an essential thing, is through restaurants.
Yeah.
People need to cook some more, right? And they need to go buy some fresh veggies and things like that and save some money. I mean, granted, this is how I supported my family for almost 30 years, but we rarely eat out. I mean, if we do, it's like to buy sushi or something like that. And so it was really an interesting, enlightening thing. And there's so many businesses that are started during downturns, right?
Yeah.
You look back over times and do that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of up on my soapbox, so let me step down for a second, right? And do
it's good. What's interesting is almost a year ago, I ended up going, it was a snowy December night, and I went and I met a friend from grade school, because I had just gotten back here to the East Coast. And so we had been Facebook friends, and we had connected a couple years earlier. And so he invited me, hey, come on up. And, and so I ended up riding up there. It was a snowy night in December, and the restaurant was packed. It was like a Wednesday or Tuesday or a Wednesday night. And I was like kind of dumbstruck by, gee, it's a snowy night. It's December. It's a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and the place is packed. And so you're right. The culture had gotten to the point where, people just ate out a lot. Life was good. People could afford to go out, and, people were going out, and it was kind of a, and then that came to a screeching halt.
Yeah. It did. I was working in Santa Monica, right? And Santa Monica Pier happened to be Bubba Gump's, right? And I was working across the street from the pier, and I even saw an article this morning where the restaurants in LA County are pushing back on the mandate on the close down, stay at home, and things like that. I mean, it's like they were barely surviving as it was. Restaurants were. 50% of them are closing down, all these different things. And now all of a sudden, I mean, there's just so many people on the ropes right now, right? Yeah. I've been on unemployment for all this time and those type of things. And so I'm grateful that I started this when I did and started building the momentum and all those things. So Steve, as we wrap this up, where can people find you online?
Yeah, AmericanGumption.com is my website, or you can go to the Spirituality Gone Wild site and look for shows and host, and I'm there too. So, but AmericanGumption.com is certainly the easiest way, or American Gumption Facebook or YouTube channels.
Awesome. I mean, and folks, I'm telling you that if you want to tap into what Steve has in his 5-day program, join the Untamed Club. There'll be and I'll be honest, it's an affiliate link for me. It's $22 a month to join. And so I'm using, Steve, you're the bait today, right? To get people to join. I'm going to have next week, I'm going to put up, we're scripting now the course on sleep, which was really the most important pillar that you can have when it comes to your health span and lifespan. And be honest with you, health span wasn't even a word, right? I used to say, extend your prime years out for decades,
Yeah.
right? So when you get to 55, like my parents got cancer at 55, what if I can move that to 85, right? So what if I can move that number out, and what can I do? And it was so many different things. And mindset is the biggest piece of it,
Yeah.
right? I quote Bruce Lee all the time. He said, the body will follow the mind. And so really understanding that is super important. And there are times when the mind will follow the body, the way you breathe and things like that can really influence the body itself, and you can reverse that. But it's super important. So, Steve, thanks again for coming on the show. And I can't thank you enough for coming on today. This special edition, which is a afternoon edition, which is only the second time. My very first show was like 8 o'clock your time on a Friday. And then now I did this show today because I was working around the longevity conference with First Longevity and Neurotech 2020. And my show is going to be tomorrow on a normal time. And it looks like we're on Biohack Whack Wednesday. And I know you do this a lot. You tease your future shows coming up. I'm really excited about the show that we have tomorrow that's developing on. Then this is something that's going to be in the Jammer, which is a 100-day longevity primer, and it's called Mental Brownies. So this is something you do while you sleep that allows your subconscious to really come up with and solve problems for yourself. So this is a super cool process that we're probably going to be talking about tomorrow on the show. And then I've got guests on Thursday and Friday, one being Mitch Marin with Goodwin Recruiting on Friday. So it's going to be something along the lines of why you need a recruiter to get your next job. And so I know a lot of people are still unemployed out there. So Steve, we're going to wrap it up right here. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Enjoyed it.